Hello, listeners. I'm Melissa, and I'm so happy to welcome you into the Dream Hub, where we explore the vast worlds within us through dreams and consciousness. Today, I'm thrilled to have David J. Brown join us. David is a true pioneer at the intersection of science, spirituality, and psychedelics. He's an author of over a dozen books whose works span lucid dreaming, shamanic healing, and the frontiers of human consciousness. His background is in neuroscience and psychology, where he holds a master's degree from New York University and a postgraduate from Southern California. His books, like The Illustrated Field Guide to DMT Entities and Dreaming Wide Awake, have shaped my understanding of the mind and its endless possibilities. Today, we'll be talking about lucid dreaming techniques, the mysteries of dream origins, and how psychedelics might deepen our connection to this unseen realm. So get comfortable as we begin this fascinating journey into the dream world with David J. Brown. Thanks for joining me, David. I'm really excited to have you here.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Melissa. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
So I'm curious, how did you first become interested in lucid dreaming, and what was it that drew you in?
How did I become interested in lucid dreaming? Well, I've been interested in dreaming and altered states of consciousness pretty much my whole life. As a child, for as long as I can remember, I've always had good dream recall, and I've always been fascinated by my dreams. I began meditating when I was 14 years old, and spontaneously, 3 days after my first psychedelic experience when I was 16 years old, I had a lucid dream. I didn't know what they were at the time. I hadn't read anything about them, but I had the experience of waking up in my dream and realizing that I was dreaming, and understanding that my body was lying asleep in bed somewhere else in some other far off dimension. And this had a very profound effect on me, even though it didn't last very long at the time. But years later, after I had gone to graduate school and was working on my first collection of interviews, I met Stephen LaBerge, the Stanford lucid dream researcher, and I read his book, and I got to spend some time discussing the phenomena with them. And it was then that I really learned and understand that there were techniques that you could do to help to increase the frequency of having lucid dreams, and about all the incredible things that you can do in a lucid dream. And so it was really, my psychedelic experience, my great dream recall, and my encounters with Stephen LaBerge that really triggered my interest in lucid dreaming, and that's how I got started on a lifelong adventure. I've had thousands of lucid dreams ever since then, and we even wrote a whole book on the subject. So it's been a great fascination of mine for a long time.
That would have been really cool to meet Stephen LaBerge. He's like the Oprah of lucid dreaming, right? He's like one of the biggest names. That's so exciting.
Yeah, yeah, he's one of the great masters. He's sort of been, he's been very hard to reach lately, and he hasn't really been doing that much in the public in the last few years. But for a while, he was extremely active. We all owe great gratitude to Stephen for being the frontier and leading the way.
Mm. I hear that psychedelics do sort of open up the dream world for a few people. Like I've had friends that have never remembered any dreams, and then they've tried mushrooms, and then all of a sudden their dream life explodes. How do you see the relationship between psychedelics and lucid dreaming?
Yeah, well, there's a number of interesting parallels. That was the subject of the whole subject of my book really was exploring that relationship. I was so surprised that no one had done it before. I mean, it seemed like such an obvious kind of connection to me, but I think there was a taboo for years around psychedelics that, it's kind of lifting right now. It's fairly controversial these days. But at the time, it was fairly controversial, and I think that's why it wasn't really being discussed. But it's very, very common for people after they have a psychedelic experience, particularly with ayahuasca, especially, to have a lucid dream spontaneously that night or the following day. It seems to happen. It seems to open something up in the person. There's a lot of connections, between psychedelic experiences and lucid dreaming. They both seem to usher in material from the unconscious mind or the subconscious mind into the conscious mind in different ways. When you're having a psychedelic experience on mushrooms, for example, and you close your eyes, you'll see, a rush of imagery often, what they call closed eye visuals or visions. And these visions, if you really pay attention, are not chaotic. It's not just a random assortment of visions. There's usually symbolic significance to them, very similarly how there is to the symbolic significance in your dreams as well. Also, when you're in a lucid dream and you look around at the world, it's often shimmering and alive, and there's kind of an electrical presence to everything, which is very similar to how the waking world looks when you're having a psychedelic experience. Many people consider a psychedelic experience to be almost like a waking dream in a sense. So there's even brain correlations, when they do it, brain imagery studies where the states of, the brain states are very similar between psilocybin experiences and ayahuasca experience and dream experiences. So there's a lot of correlation. Also, when I first interviewed the late ethnobotanist Terence McKenna, he talked to me about how when he was in a dream, when he would smoke DMT in the dream, a powerful psychedelic, and he had a full-blown DMT experience inside the dream. And I've tried this since. I've done psychedelics in the dream, and you can have a full-blown psychedelic experience inside of a lucid dream. So you don't need the drug. It's like your brain knows how to do these things already. It's, the potential is already there. So there's many other synchronistic and sensory similarities between lucid dreaming and the psychedelic experience that I explore in my book.
That's so fascinating. I've heard stories of people who have done ayahuasca and they explain it to me, like what their visions were and what came to them. And from my perspective, it just sounded so much like a lucid dream. And so then it made me feel like, well, I don't really feel the desire to do the ayahuasca because I am a lucid dreamer, right? But I'm curious, do you think that lucid dreams and psychedelics offer similar insights, or do they differ in any fundamental ways in the insights that they give to you, what the messages are that come through?
I'm not so sure that the insights differ, but the experience will generally stay with you, in a more permanent way from a psychedelic experience. It's much easier to remember, and you can also write them down while it's happening. So you don't have to trust your memory and try to hold on to the whole experience that you're having when you're lucid. Even in my best lucid dreams, I feel like I forget, a really good percentage of what's happening. I'll look at a whole series of art images. I've looked at art books inside of lucid dreams, and I try to recall the images that I'm looking at, so hard. And I wake up and I just remember this tiny percentage of them. So my recall isn't quite as good. That's one thing. But the major similarity, though, that I was realizing as you were saying that, was that in a lucid dream, what you can do, and this took me years to realize this. I first read this in one of Robert Wagner's books. But what you can do is sort of, put aside flying and all the adventure and talking to the dream characters and all those kind of things, and just ignore all that and just look up at the sky and just ask questions to the dream itself, to speak to the dreaming mind. And there's an intelligence that's orchestrating the dream that is very similar to the intelligence that you dialogue with during an ayahuasca experience. It knows you better than you know yourself, and it can give you just enormous insight into your life and into your past and into your future and so much about you. And I think that's the greatest similarity, because that's what people often report during an ayahuasca experience, is that there's a spirit within the ayahuasca. There's an intelligence that communicates with you, and it's very, very similar to the intelligence that you can communicate with in a lucid dream.
That's so fascinating. So, in your view, then, where do dreams originate? Do you think that they're solely subconscious, or are they tapping into something beyond that?
Yeah, that's such a fascinating question, isn't it? I think about that, all the time. I mean, my background's in neuroscience, and they explain dreams by saying that it's a way for the brain to, sort of sift through the memories of the day and throw some out, and then consolidate others. And so it's mostly a way of consolidating memories in the brain. Freud and Jung and other psychologists have talked about how it's a way for the unconscious mind to, communicate in symbols to the conscious mind things that, we're suppressing or, are having difficulty bringing into our conscious awareness. But, from my, adventures in lucid dreaming, it seems, almost like, interdimensional travel. Certainly also with I've had shared dreams with people, and also with my ex-partner, we actually had a shared lucid dream, which really leads me to believe that there's a genuine, space that you can travel to during these experiences out of your body and, into these other realms. And, it's really hard to know what's real and what's not, and how to judge these things. But I think the scientific research that's going on now into lucid dreaming, the ability that people are now being able to have shared communication experiences within lucid dreams through technology, not just in the way that me and my partner did. So these things will be available to more people. And I don't know that we'll ever, fully be able to solve that mystery, Melissa, but it's certainly fun to explore and contemplate, isn't it?
Yeah, I love the idea of that, like everything is right and everything is possible. Like, I agree with basically what everybody thinks dreams are. It's like, yes, it is just our subconscious. Yes, we are filing away memories. Yes, we are traveling to other dimensions. Like, yes, we can speak with people who have passed away. Like, I think all of it is real. I love to hear everyone else's beliefs and what they think.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I totally agree with you on that. Yeah.
now I'm really curious. Like people are always asking me like, "Oh, what does a dream therapist dream about?" So I'd love to hear, what do you dream about? Could you share a specific dream experience that profoundly impacted your life or your perspective?
Yeah. I'd love to. The most profound dream experience in my life actually wasn't a lucid dream. It was just a very powerful, what they call a big dream, a dream that didn't really feel personal, but that I was tapping into something larger than myself. And this happened when I was visiting a friend many years ago in Israel. And what happened was this: while I was dreaming, I found myself inside kind of like a large auditorium of sorts. And I was in with a large group of people, and we were standing up and looking out at this stage. And up on the stage was a stone throne, and sitting on the throne was a woman, or at least a woman's body, who had the head of a wildcat, or a large cat, or a feline head of some kind. And her eyes were glowing, and everyone in the audience that I was with was absolutely terrified. We were all shaking. We all somehow intuitively understood that one of us was going to be, sacrificed to her in some kind of way, and nobody knew who it was. And we were all kind of looking around, and all of a sudden, out of the eyes of this sort of this feline goddess sitting up on the stage, this like laser beam shot out, and it hit a small child, a boy who was with us, and he falls over dead into the group. And everybody else is just kind of like relieved, like, okay, that's it. He's the one who's going to be sacrificed to the goddess. And the goddess sitting on the stage suddenly, turned completely to stone. She suddenly became like a stone statue, and her eyes became just completely blank. Those large laser eyes that I talked about. And everyone in the audience felt this great sense of relief, because we all somehow knew that for at least for now, she was satisfied, and none of us else would be taken, and we were all just feeling this tremendous sense of relief. And I woke up from this dream with a start, and my heart was racing, and my body was sweating, and it was so intense. But really was, made the dream so meaningful was what happened afterwards. I returned to London around a week later. I was working with British biologist Rupert Sheldrake, the person who developed the idea of morphic fields. And Rupert and I were working on some research projects at the time, and we were walking around the Hampstead Heath, this beautiful forested area inside of London, and I recounted my dream, that I had to Rupert while I was in Israel, and he goes, David, that's remarkable. I just got this book this morning from a woman named Barbara Ehrenreich called Blood Rights. And it's all about, our evolutionary history and the origin of religion. And she hypothesizes that there was this period in our evolutionary path where humans were prey animals. We were the prey of wildcats. And we understood that, we could be eaten by a wildcat anytime, but we also got a lot of our food from the wildcats because the animals that they used as prey, they wouldn't finish eating, and they, became for us meals. So we sort of saw them as like simultaneously, you know, taking one of us, as a sort of sacrifice, and also providing for us, as a food source. And Barbara Ehrenreich hypothesizes that this was how, our earliest religions developed. And wasn't it remarkable that I had this dream in Israel, which was the land where, where the three major Western religions, first had their origins. And, this sort of this tingle traveled up my spine as Rupert was telling me this, because it really had this incredible feeling of ringing true for me. And so then a few weeks after that, I was thumbing through a book on Egyptian mythology. And what did I see but a stone statue of a goddess sitting on a throne, Bastet, sitting on a throne, a woman's body with the head of a wildcat. And again, just like this shiver up my spine of just like, wow, I must have really tapped into something about the origins of religion. It did not feel at all like a personal dream. It felt like I was tapping into something collective and universal at the time. So that was one of the most powerful dreams I ever had. Then a few years later, I was visiting my friend Jeff McBride, a magician who lives in Las Vegas. I was doing a workshop there. And in his backyard, there's this giant stone statue of Bastet sitting on the throne. And I was like, oh my God, flashback right to my dream. So, that dream just led to all these interesting synchronicities. And it was a very meaningful experience for me that still to this day, as I'm telling you this, I get shivers up my spine.
Mhm. Wow. Isn't it interesting that you shared that dream and your friend said like it was just that day or the day before he'd just bought that book? I find it fascinating with synchronicities like that and the timing of everything. Like, I think sharing our dreams is so important in giving us connection and meaning to things. And yeah, wow, what an amazing dream, and for it to keep repeating on you in different ways as well. So then that makes me wonder about like, and you don't need to answer this, but it just had me curious about like where in your life are you sacrificing to also be nourished? Because it's sort of like that, if that was the message that was coming through in the dream, that made me curious.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, certainly, so much about our spiritual evolution is tied to sacrifice, how we have to give up certain things in order to gain other things. So yeah, it's a very interesting connection.
Thank you for sharing. That was a really interesting dream. I was like, I could feel myself glued to you with every word you were saying. That was really fascinating. So the people that are listening now, like that wasn't a lucid dream, but lucid dreams are awesome. And I feel like they listen along to these podcasts, try and learn tips of the ways that they can, help themselves in their dreams. What are some lucid dreaming techniques that you find are especially effective or unique?
Yeah, be happy to share that. So probably the single most valuable technique that I've learned for increasing the frequency of having lucid dreams is something I learned from Stephen LaBerge, which is getting into the habit of asking yourself that all important question: Am I dreaming right now? And it's set an alarm on your watch or something so that you ask every hour on the hour you ask yourself that question: Am I dreaming right now? And and the idea is that if you get into the habit of asking yourself that question, it'll carry over into your dream. And it's very important that when you ask yourself this question, that you don't just say, "Oh, of course I'm not dreaming right now," because if you do that, that's going to actually carry over into the dream, because in the dream, we often confuse the, dreaming world with the waking world. We think we're awake when we're dreaming until we actually wake up and don't realize that we were dreaming. So it's important to take what's called a reality test. And the one that I like using best, I mean, you can hold your nose and try breathing through your nostrils. If you can breathe through your nostrils with your nose clenched, then you're dreaming. The one that I use the most, though, is to look at a book or something written on it, and to look at what the words say, the text on the book, and to look away and then to look back. And in waking reality, the words will always stay the same. They remain consistent. But in the dream, they'll almost always change into other words almost every time. In fact, if you just stare at the words, they'll often just morph right before your eyes and change. So that's one technique. And another technique that's really good is what they call the wake up back to bed method, which is to set your alarm around 2 hours before you normally wake up, and to get up, walk around the house a little bit, meditate. Don't wake yourself, too much, because you want to be able to go back to sleep, but enough to sort of, wake up a certain part of your mind, so that when you do go back to sleep, there's a part of you that's more awake. And studies have shown that dramatically increases the number of lucid dreams as you're falling asleep. As you're falling back asleep during that time, repeat to yourself like a mantra: the next time I'm dreaming, I want to remember to recognize that I'm dreaming. The next time that I'm dreaming, I want to remember to recognize that I'm dreaming. So you can sort of set that intention, into your mind also. Um, also, keeping a dream journal is just absolutely, of paramount importance. You really want to get into the habit of remembering your dreams, because you don't want to have a lucid dream and forget it. So you really want to start paying attention, and the more attention you pay to your dreams, the better you'll remember them. There's just even if you feel like you can't remember a dream, just writing down how you feel when you woke up from it, is helpful. Or just one little snippet, and you find that just that'll lead to other memories or other aspects of the dream that they're associated with. So really get into the habit of that. And in my book, I discuss all different types of herbs. We can talk about that a little later, and nutritional supplements that also help. Um, but also just talking about and reading about lucid dreaming actually helps. You don't know how many times people have told me, "Oh, I heard you talking on a podcast, and then that night I had my first lucid dream." So talking about it, thinking about it, reading about it, and then combining all of these techniques. There's a synergistic effect from combining, the wake up active method with testing your reality, and all these different things together. When you combine them, there's a greater frequency of lucid dreams that people report.
Those tips are all so amazing, and thank you for giving so much detail. I know that, yeah, combining them all, like, you're bound to have a lucid dream. The dream journaling thing, people assume that, like, oh, I had a lucid dream, I'll just know it when I wake up. But I find even myself, I'll remember just a fragment of the dream and I'll start journaling it, and then comes another memory and I'm like, oh, that's right, that happened before this. Oh, that's right. And then I'm like, oh, I did get lucid last night, and I had forgotten,
Right.
until I start writing it down, and then it all comes flooding back, and I'm like, oh wow, like, go me. But you don't even realize, because I think the first thing I wake up, oh no, I didn't get lucid, and just don't worry about it. I think people think you should only write down a dream that you feel is worth writing down, but I'm like, write them all down, because you don't realize until you start, then they come flooding back in, all the details.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's great.
absolutely. Yeah, that's super important. Also, if you keep a record of your dreams, you'll start to see patterns in them that you normally don't see when you first write them down. So looking at them months later and things like that. So it's been an
Mm,
absolutely essential tool for me to record my dreams.
definitely. So some people are intrigued by using dream tech and like devices. What are your thoughts on these tools for aiding in lucid dreaming?
Yeah, I tried a number of them when I was writing my book. I have a chapter on them. This is something that Stephen LaBerge was the first to develop a lucid dream invocation technology. It's basically a pair of these soft goggles that you wear while you're sleeping, and they have little sort of infrared detectors on them that can detect motion detectors that can detect when you're in the rapid eye movement stage of sleep, which is when people are most actively dreaming and their eyes are moving back and forth across their closed eyelids. When the motion detector detects the rapid eye movement stage, it starts flashing a very a red a red light that's not enough to wake you up, but it gets incorporated into the dream, and it becomes sort of a signal for people if they get if they prep themselves with remembering that if everything starts strobing red, it means I'm in a dream. So for some people that seems to work, and I tried a device called the REM Dreamer when I was researching my book, and it did actually help. I don't think these things are really necessary. I think the other techniques that I described, they work perfectly well. But it did help. And it was an interesting thing. What's probably even more interesting, though, is that at the Max Planck Institute in Germany, they've been experimenting with transcranial brain stimulation. These bands that you wear around your head while you're sleeping, and when it detects that you're in REM sleep, it'll actually through transcranial brain stimulation send an electric current to your prefrontal cortex, and it activates that area of your brain which is normally dormant when you're having regular dreams but is normally activated, or when you're having a lucid dream. And they found that when they did this, that something like 88% of the time people had reported lucid dreams. So it was a way of stimulating lucid dreams on command. And last I heard, there were some people doing a Kickstarter program to try to miniaturize this technology and try to mass produce it so that anyone can have the technology to have lucid dreams on command soon.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. I was doing like the regular, the checking, like, is this a dream? Am I dreaming right now? And I found that fascinating that I automatically did it in a dream. And then I was kind of shocked into the lucidity in the middle of whatever the dream was happening. Like there wasn't a trigger that made me realize, or I wasn't slowly like, oh, something weird is happening. It was just like, boom, this is a dream. And I'm imagining that having that happen would be even like stronger because you just like
Right.
snapped into
Like jolt,
it.
right,
Yeah,
right,
jolting into it.
right. Yeah.
Wow,
Well,
that's cool.
I certainly also felt that, with practice lucid dreaming, that you don't even have to do the reality test after a while. You just sort of know when you're dreaming,
Yeah.
because you're in kind of an altered state and you just have a kind of awareness. Or oftentimes I'll just try to jump up and see if I could fly, and sure enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I do this thing with my daughter. She's 5 and she wants to have lucid dreams. And so every time she sees a star, we check if we're in a dream. And she comes running over to me and says, pull my finger. Or she'll just jump to try and see if she can fly. And she's like, damn. But yeah, she does, like you warned against assuming that you're not dreaming, because she'll look at it and go, no, I'm not dreaming. And I'm like, you haven't taken the time to stop and properly check. Scan the whole room, see if anything weird is happening, then see if you can physically fly. Like you have to try it every time and not just assume. And then
Yeah.
that following night, she had a dream because her plan, we both have celiac disease. We can't eat gluten. So her plan is that she wants to be able to eat whatever she wants. So then that night she had a dream that she was eating all of these candies that were in the shapes of stars, and she still didn't become lucid because it just was, she said it felt too real. but she was really excited because I was like, see, even your dream is trying to help you get to your goal because you're thinking about what you want while you're awake. You've got the plan, and now your dream is, giving you the breadcrumbs as such to get there. So that's cool.
Oh, that's delightful to hear. Somebody wrote a
Yeah.
book I saw, a children's book about how to have lucid dreams. I can't remember the title
Yeah.
of the
Angel
author, but
Morgan, was it her?
yeah, that sounds right. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good one. We've got that one at home. So yeah, we read through that too. So
Awesome.
lots of people ask me, and I'd love to hear your description of the differences between lucid dreaming, astral projection, and out-of-body experiences.
Yeah, that's a tricky one to answer actually, because I think they're so similar and they certainly blur together and it's hard to know where one ends and another begins. You know, the when I was researching my book, I had a lot of experiences with sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis is when your mind wakes up, but your body is sort of still paralyzed from sleep. And when we go to sleep, our body becomes sort of in a state of paralysis so that we don't act out the behaviors that we do in our dreams. And, when people experience sleep paralysis, their mind wakes up, their eyes usually pop open, and yet they can't move their bodies. And for most people, that's a very frightening experience usually. It usually doesn't last very long. People usually, struggle to move their bodies and then suddenly snap out of it. And, they're usually relieved, usually only a few seconds usually of fear. But when I was experiencing this quite a lot when I was researching my book. I realized that when I would try to move my paralyzed body during the state of sleep paralysis, that even though I couldn't move my physical limbs, even though my arm wouldn't move up, when I would go to move my physical arm wouldn't move up, but I would notice that something was. There was like a ghostly limb, that was kind of moving up in response to my intention to move my arm. And I, with practice, I learned that if I didn't become frightened during this state and learned to kind of just lie there in it, what I could do was I could sort of shift my focus from my physical body to this sort of ghostly limbs that I could move. And this then became my dream body or my astral body, and I was able to have out of body experiences very easily during that time. And when I would leave my body though and be in my bedroom would be slightly altered. It wouldn't be like quite the same bedroom. Like a window would be, in a different place, or the furniture would be kind of moved, or the door would be in a different place. So it was kind of like an altered version of my bedroom, which leads me to believe it was kind of a stimulation in my mind, that was happening, and maybe wasn't truly, the physical reality of it. We also know in physical reality that, our brain constructs simulations in our mind of the waking world. So it's hard to know, but the thing was that those what I use as a launching pad for the out of body experiences also then became a launching pad for lucid dreams, because then when I was in that out of body experience state, I would just walk out the front door and I would suddenly go and be able to go on lucid dream adventures. So there was a very thin boundary in my own experience between an out of body experience and what later became a lucid dream. And I think what people call, astral traveling. I know the first books that were written on lucid dreaming, long before Stephen LaBerge and Keith Hearn were doing the scientific research back in the 1970s. The first books were all written by people involved in the occult, and they all saw it as astral travel, and that was the way it was defined. So I'm not really sure what the differences are. I know some people have pretty firm, definitions, but in my own experience, they've actually all kind of blurred together and been very, very similar. What about you? What are your take on
Yeah,
it?
I feel the same way. It is hard to tell the difference. And some people will say, oh, well, lucid dreaming's all internal and astral projection's all external and these sorts of things. But I feel like you go internally to get externally anyway, and then it's never, I mean, so you can still see things that are the same in reality. Like, for example, like you could see the exact cars that are on the street, and then when you do wake up in this reality, you walk out and those exact cars are where they are. So I understand that part of it. But like you said, there's things that can be different. Like I've had it where there's like a window in my room that wasn't there before and things like that.
Yeah.
So is
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
what you talk about with the simulation theory?
Well, yeah, we can get into that in a second, but let me just say, you're right. There have been people during, near-death experiences, people, during surgery, for example, are able to often report things that they shouldn't have been able to hear if they were unconscious from the anesthesia, and oftentimes from vantage points, like from the ceiling, they shouldn't have been able to even see. And so there's those anecdotes. How do people know all that? And Charles Tart did a number of studies with testing people, see if they can read numbers, from a vantage point in a room, and they were having out of body experiences, and whether they were able to do it. But whether they were actually physically traveling, or maybe could be using some other type of psychic sense to gain that information, and it gets incorporated into the brain stimulation. Could it be telepathy or some other type of psychic awareness that's leading people to be able to see or being able to get sensory input about those things? So it's very, very tricky to understand, what's really happening. But simulation theory, is that what? Yeah, is that what you wanted to ask me about? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, that's very fascinating to me. It's something I explored a lot in my latest book. Um, well, simulation theory is something that was developed by Nick Bostrom. He's a philosopher at Oxford, and he wrote a scientific paper about this a couple of decades ago. Basically, it's based on this idea that back in the 1990s, they started developing something called virtual reality, which was, the ability to simulate realities with using these sort of video goggles and headphones. And at the time, it was just sort of these like lines that were like the early, video games like Pong. And in the last couple of decades, the technology has advanced so far that now they're almost close to photorealistic. The virtual realities that you can go into, and if we're this close to being able to have a virtual reality system that's almost indistinguishable from true physical reality, and how advanced will we be in just a couple of decades when we have brain implants and more sophisticated systems being able to do this. And so it seems like we're not that far off from being able to create realities that are in every way indistinguishable from physical reality. And so surely, civilizations that are more advanced than us, our universe is just brimming with star systems that are much older than ours. So civilizations that are hundreds or thousands of years more advanced than us, surely they have developed simulation systems that are that are at least as good as that, right? So Nick Bostrom then actually has these mathematical calculations where he's somehow figures out that the odds for us not being in a simulated reality are like billions to one, that we're not in the base reality. So it's a mind-boggling idea to think about. And and as I mentioned earlier, we're all living in a simulation of sorts. So because our brain is creating a simulation of the external world in our in our brain inside that we're living in. We think we're looking out these windows into the external world, but we're just collecting light energy that our brains are recreating inside our visual cortex to create a simulation of the visual world, and we're living inside that simulation. And then when we're dreaming, we're inside some kind of simulation within the simulation, right? So it's like where one simulation ends and begins, it's like a giant fractal of possibilities that and I don't who knows whether we'll ever discover whether we're in or whether we're living in a computer simulation that was devised by extraterrestrials or not. But it's certainly another fascinating thought experiment and something to speculate about.
I love that so much. I've been really getting into the Gateway experience, or the Gateway project, that CIA document that was explaining about how we can travel doing all of these different things and explaining how the brain is a hologram and just seeing things from different perspectives. And there was a video on YouTube about, I'll have to put a link to it, but it's about like the power of 10, and it zooms out from like us and then zooming out by 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. And you see
Right.
how tiny we are, and then how
Right.
many other, like in the universe, or the different, like you said, there's different planets and stars and everything. And we think that like the whole world's revolving around us when we've got our own little problems, but we're so tiny and insignificant, and there is so much out there that we have no idea about. So it's really interesting that you brought that up. Is that what you believe about like other planets and systems and everything beyond us, that we're so tiny? And
Yeah, well, I mean, we're so tiny, we're so big. It depends on where you're starting. I mean, compared to an atom or the cells, the cells in our
yeah.
body would think of us like this great, god or goddess, that we're somehow, all these tiny billions of cells, they come together and they form, this great consciousness. So from their point of view, it's, we're almost like a god or something. And then, you can zoom out from us into the stars, the star clusters, the galaxies, the galaxy clusters. If you go far enough out, it looks like, all the galaxy clusters form into these kind of mycelial, it looks like a mycelial network, the way that, a fungus, forms networks, or the way, our own brain, the neurons in our own brain, it looks like we're like embedded in some kind of giant brain of the universe almost. So, it's, we're in some sense a hologram of the whole universe. Whether we're so large or so insignificant depends on your perspective. But I think in some sense, we're really the whole thing, at the same time. So, yeah, it's just mind-boggling to think
It
about
is.
these concepts.
If you're listening now, I'll put a link to the video that I'm referring to. And like David's saying, it does zoom back in as well. So the video zooms out so you can see how tiny you are, but then it zooms in to a spot on a man's hand, and it goes in and shows you everything that you're made up of as well. So yeah, it's so interesting to see it from all these different perspectives. So, David, with DMT research on the rise, do you see potential connections between DMT experiences and dream states?
Yeah, I do. It's a very interesting connection. It's not something that I'm super interested in. Well, DMT, dimethyltryptamine, is a chemical that's naturally found in the human body. It's endogenous to the human body. It's found in almost all animals. It's found in almost every plant. It's pretty much ubiquitous throughout nature. It's like everywhere in nature. And no biochemist can tell you why it's there. They don't know what function it serves in the human body or any animal's body for that matter. It's completely mysterious. And yet at the same time, if it's used as a drug, if people smoke it or use it, ingest it in some way, it's one of the components in ayahuasca that we mentioned earlier. Um, it produces a psychedelic experience that's of an order of magnitude far more intense than LSD or psilocybin or any of the other classical psychedelics. So that in itself is just this big mystery. Um, and then if you ingest enough DMT, what happens is that you find yourself completely immersed in a new reality. It's almost like being in a lucid dream. You no longer can see the material waking world around you. You're suddenly in this other environment where it's populated by intelligent beings, beings that try to communicate with you. Um, and this is the subject of my latest book, the Illustrated Field Guide to the DMT Entities, where me and my great friend Sarah Finn Huntley, who's a brilliant artist, she illustrated the possible DMT entities, and I wrote descriptions of them like it was like a nature field guide, like to reptiles and amphibians and things like that, because people often report so many similarities between the types of entities that people describe. And like in a lucid dream, if you start communicating with them, they seem to know you better than you know yourself. They have this, great wisdom, and it's just this really extraordinary experience. Now, Rick Strassman, one of the researchers who really, pioneered a lot of the studies into DMT, hypothesized that that the brain produces DMT in higher quantities when we're dreaming. We know that there's higher quantities of it in your bloodstream. In around 3 o'clock in the morning, it's supposed to peak at endogenously in your body. And so he's wondered, could this be an explanation for how we dream? Is it just our body's, natural production of DMT that's causing us to dream? And right now at the Imperial College in London, they're doing studies with extended state DMT. When you take DMT as a drug, it generally, unless you're doing it in ayahuasca where it's extended over several hours, if you do it as a drug, that intense state that I'm describing where you're in this other reality generally lasts like 5 or 10 minutes. Your body very quickly metabolizes it and you come back very quickly. So they're finding ways to, through this, the way they put somebody under for anesthesia, they're doing it with DMT at Imperial College and putting people under now, under or over or outer, I don't know how you want to say it, but putting people out into this state of consciousness for extended periods of time, for a half an hour, for an hour, and possibly longer, so they can have longer periods of contact with these entities that people describe in this experience, and hopefully bring back information, bring back experiences that they can share, and hope to be able to tell whether there's an objective reality to this or whether it's just skeptics of course say that it's just hallucinations, that people are just seeing something that's not really there, and people that come back from the experience are like, no way, this is definitely real. You have to experience it for yourself to see what I'm talking about, but it's more real than real, it's the most common thing that people say about it. So it seems like it's another level of reality, kind of like what you experience in a lucid dream, that has that sense of reality to it. It doesn't just feel like it's something that your brain is creating. You feel like you're really visiting, another plane of reality. So the other thing they're doing now at Imperial College is they're sending people out together. They're sending them to see if they can have shared experiences in these states as a way of also being able to tell if there's an objective reality to these experiences.
That's so interesting. So I'm wondering, like, if we get flooded with DMT when we're born and when we die, and then you're saying in our bodies at around 3 a.m., I'm wondering if it's the DMT in our bodies that's causing the dream, or if it's because we're in the dream state, it's the dream that's giving us the DMT. Like, do you think that if someone was awake through the night and they didn't dream, would they still have a spike of DMT around that time? Do you get what I'm saying?
I do understand what you're saying. It's a really, really interesting question. Well, it is interesting that 3 o'clock in the morning, though, is often a time that people report psychic phenomena, which is often called the witching hour. People report these uncanny kinds of experiences often right around 3 o'clock in the morning, which has often led me to believe that maybe, the DMT in our body is spiking, at that time. So, on the one hand, it may be like that. On the other hand, you mentioned that the possibility, it's not actually confirmed, we don't know this, but this is one of the theories, that DMT is produced, that is one of the things that helps to usher the soul into the body and out of the body at birth, at death. We do know from studies with laboratory animals, with rats, that when they go into cardiac arrest, that their brains do produce more DMT. So that's, leads credence to the idea that people, when they have their near-death experiences, is actually due to an increase in DMT. So it may be that, the DMT plays this role of sort of ushering our spirit in and out of our body in some way. But then at the same time, people also have those strange experiences around 3 in the morning. So it's hard to say. Maybe our body's trying to usher us out at 3 in the morning because of these biological cycles. But since we're still physically in them, it just opens us up to these other types of levels of experience. But it's a great mystery, and that's a great question. I hadn't really thought about that before.
Yeah. Oh, well, we'll find out soon. It sounds like they're doing all of the testing and the research. It sounds absolutely amazing. So, yeah, that'll be interesting to see how it goes. So,
Yeah.
speaking of like people can take DMT, they can take psychedelics, but you mentioned briefly earlier about nutritional supplements, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on these and how they play a role in aiding or enhancing our dreams.
Yeah, that's something that, I have a whole chapter in that in my book. I actually experimented and tried, dozens of them myself, to see what worked and see what, it didn't work for me. Um, I found that vitamin B6 is something that almost anyone can take. It's cheaply and available at the health food store. And that for me, dramatically improved dream recall. In fact, the people that suffer from vitamin B6 deficiency often report that they can't, remember their dreams. So that's a really simple way of having better dream recall. There's an herb that's available in many herb stores called Kalia zakatiki. It is otherwise known as the Mexican dream herb, and many people say that it helps them with lucid dreaming. Um, I experimented with it quite a bit and really enjoyed it. I didn't find that it increased my frequency of lucid dreams, but it definitely affected my dreams in interesting ways. Just falling asleep with that hypnagogic state, the in between waking and sleeping, was greatly enhanced. It was almost like a mild ayahuasca experience with the Kalia Zakatiki, and the dreams that I had with it were it's hard to describe the difference in the quality, but were more magical in some kind of way, or had a more enchanted quality, is the best way I can describe it. Um, then there was Thylline capensis, which is known as the African dream herb. It comes from the African continent, and this dream herb, very similar to what the Mexican dream herb did, but in a whole, different quality of way. I don't know how to put my finger on it. I think I felt that the Mexican dream herb was more feminine, and the African dream herb was more masculine. I don't know if that really means anything, but that's the way it seemed to me. But they both had that similar quality of increasing the enhancing my hypnagogic in between waking and sleeping state, and adding this sort of magical or enchanted quality. People would turn into animals and things like that during dreams. And that was I enjoyed them both. I thought they definitely were really fun and to experiment with, and they're easily available online or in health food stores or in herb shops. The one herb that I tried that really did increase my lucid dreams was something called velvet bean, which has a precursor to dopamine in it, something called L-dopa, an amino acid. And I found that when I would take that before going to sleep, that made my dreams more vivid and more active, and I definitely had more lucid dreams during those times I tried that as well. So that's also available in health food stores and easily to get. What what many lucid dream explorers call the holy grail of these lucid dream supplements is something called galantamine, which is easily available on the internet. It's what people usually call a smart drug, and it's actually many people use it for cognitive enhancement or help with memory or senile dementia even, because it enhances memory when you're awake. And what it does is it increases acetylcholine levels in the brain. And many people, many people that I know that have tried it say, every time they use it, they have a lucid dream like without fail. It's just, the perfect lucid dream tool. Melissa, I tried it 3 times, and the problem that I had with it is I'm just a very light sleeper, and it's a mild stimulant, and I was never able to sleep on it every time I tried it. And I kept doing it in lower and lower dosages to, see if I was able to sleep. And I took it with tryptophan and other things to help me sleep, and I just could never fall asleep on it. So for me, it didn't work. But I know for many other people, it's, like I said, the holy grail
I've
of
tried
lucid
it
dream
once
supplements.
when I was with Amina and we were in Brussels and we were in a hotel room, and she brought like a chemist with her of all these dreaming things, and she's like, "What do you want to try?" Instead of us going out like partying in the clubs, taking drugs, we're at home like taking supplements and napping. Um, But I felt I had like, it felt kind of like a false awakening, and everything felt really, really real. And I remembered everything. Like, yeah, it was just that I had like woken up and I was in the hotel room with Amina, and we're like getting ready to go and do what we were doing that day and things like that. And I don't remember where it went. I'd have to consult my dream journal, but it was really vivid and everything just felt real, like as real as real. So it was interesting and I remembered a lot. And like with the Mexican dream herb, the first time I tried that, I had 6 dreams in one night. And I was usually at that stage, I would only remember about 1 or 2 per week. So I was just blown away, and I would wake up after say 2 dreams and remember them and write them all down, and then go back to sleep and then have more dreams and wake up and write them all back down. So yeah, that's interesting. I did really enjoy those. They were good.
Mhm.
So after this hour of talking, I've asked a bunch of questions. I haven't even gotten through them all, but I feel like we could talk forever. But what I want to ask you to finish off is like, what's your main message or your big story, or what is it that you want to get out into the world to help people in some way?
Um, well, I think that that lucid dreaming, first of all, is something that anyone can do. I don't think that it's anything special about me really that makes me able to do it. And I think that's something that everyone can benefit from. It's not just fun. I mean, certainly it is great fun. Being able to fly is extraordinary, but it has therapeutic properties. You can use it to explore childhood traumas or things like that, or fears or nightmares or things like that. And even more than that, it has I think tremendous spiritual potential. That you can talk to dream characters that are wiser than you are, or to the dream itself, like I was discussing earlier. And this can open up just windows of tremendous insight and possibility. So I think it's really just a tremendous tool to being able to help people in the waking world. It's not just something to have a lot of fun with. And people use it for healing. When I was talking to Robert Wagner one time about his does a dream journal, and he told me that he gets more mail about people that have had healing experiences from their lucid dreams than anything else. People can, if they have some kind of physical ailment, I used it, I was having chronic headaches for a while, and I invoked the spirit of my late physician who passed on, and he put his hands on my head, during the dream and during this lucid dream. And, I woke up with my headaches greatly relieved, the chronic headaches I was having. So I think it's a great tool for healing and for insight and for creativity and for all kinds of wonderful things. And it's not just something that a limited few can do. It's something that I think all human beings have access to.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, this is my important message too. I healed my mental health through dreams and lucid dreaming, and it's something that I just felt so passionate about. Like, all of us have this ability and not many people realize it. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for this thought-provoking conversation. You've opened up so many doors for all of us in the nature of dreaming, consciousness, and the interconnectedness of all of these different realms. So for listeners who want to dive deeper, be sure to check out David's books. I'll put the link in the show notes for you. And on behalf of the listeners and myself, we're grateful for your insights and for sharing such rich experiences with us today. Okay, everyone, thank you for listening to the Dream Hub podcast. And until next time, keep dreaming, stay curious, and remember, your dreams might hold the answers that you've been searching for all along. Thank you so much, David. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Melissa. It's been a great pleasure. Let's do it again sometime.
Definitely.